Apple's iPhone 6s may be a couple of years old, but don't count it out just yet. Apple's 2015 flagship is still a solid option for many users, especially given that it's now dropped to a comparatively affordable price. The question is, can it keep up with modern devices, including both more recent iPhones and competing Android flagships? Designers with all Apples Sclass phones, the iPhone 6s shares the exact same design, dimensions and aesthetic as its immediate predecessor, the iPhone 6. The sleek, rounded aluminium chassis is still attractive and understated, but does suffer a little from being slightly slippery in the hand. It's not quite as unwieldy as the larger 6s Plus, though. Size-wise, the iPhone 6s is still very much keeping up with modern flagships. At 7.1 mm thick and with a weight of 143 grams, it's marginally lighter and thinner than both the Samsung Galaxy S8 and even the iPhone 8. Many phones start to look outdated after a year or so, but the 6s is not one of them. Display. Another thing that the 6s has borrowed from its predecessor is the 4.7 inches, 1334 by 750 display. This, sadly, is one of the few areas in which the 6s starts to look a bit behind the curve. Even budget and mid-range phones now come with 1080p screens, and the likes of the Galaxy S8 with its QHD OLED panel positively leaves the iPhone 6s in the dust. While there's nothing technically wrong with a display which delivers bright, accurate colors, excellent contrast and wide viewing angles, it's outclassed by more modern screens, and we found ourselves longing for a higher resolution display when watching videos. Specs and hardware. The 6s uses Apple's dual-core 1.8 GHz A9 processor, which offers a considerable boost in speed over the iPhone 6s 1.4 GHz A8 chip. In our benchmark tests, the iPhone 6s was over 50% faster than its predecessor, and even compared favorably with current generation Android flagships, beating the Galaxy S8's score for single-threaded operations. Of course, it's lagging considerably behind Apple's latest devices, and the iPhone X racked up roughly double the 6s score in our tests. However, when compared to Android devices, the iPhone 6s is more than holding its own. Battery life. The only downside is that all this extra power comes at the cost of battery life. In our continuous video playback test, the 6s lasted 11 hours 18 minutes with the screen set to 170 cdm2, which is almost 2 hours behind the iPhone 6 when tested under the same conditions and more than 2.5 hours behind the iPhone 8 Plus. It's also light years behind current generation Android devices, which are now regularly racking up a battery life of 20 hours or more. In light of this, the fact that the 6s will struggle to get you through a full day is a disappointment. Camera. Apple's put a lot of work into the 6s's camera, fitting it with a larger 12-megapixel sensor this time instead of sticking with the 6s 8-megapixel sensor. This increases the amount of detail present, but its lack of optical image stabilization means its low light performance isn't a match for the 6s Plus and more recent iPhones. The difference in quality between the 6s and Android cameras isn't nearly as clear-cut either. In fact, the Galaxy S8 and Google Pixel 2 have, by our reckoning, quite handily surpassed the 6s in terms of the quality of the photos. While it's still an excellent camera, it's no longer the world beater that it once was. Features. 3D Touch is the iPhone 6s's biggest feature. Much like Apple's pressure-sensitive Force Touch technology on the Apple Watch and 12 inches Retina MacBook, 3D Touch allows you to press harder on the screen to access different shortcuts and options. On home screen app icons, it works in a similar way to right-clicking an icon on a Mac or PC, allowing you to jump to certain tasks straight away without having to navigate to them manually within the app. For example, you could go straight to video recording in the camera, or send a direct message in Twitter. An app. 3D Touch doubles up as a preview tool, allowing you to peek into emails and URLs with an initial firm press, and then opening them fully by pressing even harder. In most cases, 3D Touch is a great addition. It not only saves time, but it's also extremely practical, particularly if you're using the phone single-handedly. It's a shame not all apps work with 3D Touch right now, but this is sure to change over time. Likewise, Apple's clever haptic feedback system lets you know whether or not you've pressed the screen with enough force. However, the 4.7 inches screen also has its downsides when using 3D Touch, as preview windows could often be obscured by our thumb. This is less of a problem on the larger 5.5 inches 6S Plus, but it's easier to work around once you get the hang of it. Verdict: compared to Apple's more recent devices, the iPhone 6s may seem a little underwhelming, but it's worth remembering that it's also the company's most affordable mainstream handset. At £449, including VAT, it's around £250 cheaper than the iPhone 8, and less than half the price of the iPhone X. It should also be noted that the iPhone 6s still compared very favorably to modern Android devices, rivaling devices like the Galaxy S8 and OnePlus 5T in terms of performance. It's not quite the equal of the 5T in terms of sheer value for money, given that the 5T has a much more impressive camera, screen and battery life, but it's still a worthy contender. There are certain areas that let it down on underwhelming display and distinctly subpar battery life, for example, but the iPhone 6s isn't as outdated as you might think. For businesses that want to deploy iOS devices throughout the business without the extortionate price tag of a current-generation iPhone, the iPhone 6s is still well worth taking into consideration. Specifications: OS iOS 9 preloaded display 4.7 inches, 1334 by 750,326 pixels per inch. Processor 1.8 GHz Apple A9 dual-core 64-bit M9 coprocessor. RAM 2 GB. Biometrics Touch ID fingerprint sensor. Storage 1,664,128 GB. Camera 12 megapixel with autofocus. Flash 5 megapixel front-facing. Connectivity: Wi-Fi 802.11 APNIAC, Bluetooth 4.2, NFC, 4G, GPS, GLONASS ports. Lightning connector. Dimensions: 138 by 67 by 7 mm. WXDXH battery 1715 mAh. Weight 143 grams.